Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight for our Meadowbrook Middle School reopening update. I just want to say I'm so grateful that we have this time together, and I know there's been a lot happening, and I look forward to updating you and bringing you up to speed with where we're at. I want to assure you what we believe is that in-person teaching and learning is our most effective model for school. And we could all agree on that. For instance, my own children that I have, it's been a challenge as a single parent and figuring out what they're going to do educationally, as well as being a parent and working full time. So I can empathize with wanting our schools to open back up, and I appreciate the time that they get to spend on campus, even if it's only a couple days a week. They're in elementary school, but you know, I really think that our best learning model is in-person teaching and learning. I also know that it's very important that students and staff need to be safe when attending school. And this current situation we're in, and schools have been closed since March, it's very pertinent that when we do return, we do it safely. And this is also one of our number one goals, is to make sure students and staff are both safe. So our current task. The Poway Unified School District Board has asked all secondary schools to develop a reopening plan and a timeline. Currently, we were exploring options and looking for consensus regarding a school schedule and timeline that will work for our students, parents, and staff. So the goal is for school to open and for as many students as possible and as soon as it is feasible for them to return. Our current situation. Meadowbrook's enrollment is approximately 1,200 students. In July, we took a family survey. I understand that this family survey was based off of an AM/PM model. And at that time, approximately 64% of our families chose in-person learning, 34% chose virtual learning academy, and 2% chose New Directions or our alternative schools. And also at that time, our metrics were different as well. So that goes to tell us that once we do have a model, we do need to go ahead and resurvey our families so that you're able to say, based off of the current proposed model, whether or not you would prefer for your child to be in person or learn virtually. So this is our challenge. We cannot accommodate 770 students at once on campus and maintain current required physical distancing standards, meaning we can't have 770 students on campus and still keep them 6 feet apart. So here are the parameters that we're trying to work within. One, our school schedule must work within the Poway Unified School District transportation schedule. So for instance, we need to make sure that we have a similar start time and end time, and that our late day is on Tuesdays. We're looking to see if we can change it from Tuesdays to Monday as it currently is, but whether or not we can do that, we're not sure yet because there's an effect on other schools with their late start days. Also, in an effort to not disrupt our schedule, we must try to support both virtual learning and in-person students with the same teacher that they're currently with. So they've already developed relationships, gotten comfortable, and what we're trying not to do is disrupt the scheduling and have to shuffle students and change teachers and so on and so forth. Another parameter we're looking at is the 6-foot distancing. So 6-foot distancing is still required as much as feasible, and we have plastic dividers you can see in the picture that we can utilize in classrooms. And so we'll talk more about that. Also, there's staffing considerations. Some staff are not able to return to campus because of medical concerns, and we're working with the district office on staffing solutions. We'll take a deeper look at that and the cost fiscally. Also, in-person learning will look very different than it did when they left in March. And so there might be less collaboration, continued digital focus for work, meaning using Canvas as our digital learning platform, and also the continuation of virtual learning. Here's where we are so far with our staggered return. Currently, we have special education students in our special day classes on campus. This started October 20th. This includes our basis program, which includes 1 teacher and support staff, our non-severely handicapped students, which includes 3 teachers and support staff. We started with these students because they are highly vulnerable and need the in-person instruction. They're also self-contained classes, which made it easier to bring them back for their education on campus. We are looking at early November, bringing back students that need supervision who are also highly vulnerable groups. We're going to be using our ACES staff. We will have 3 cohorts of approximately 15 students, and we will continue through November and December to bring back small cohort students, as many as we possibly can, and support supervision. We're looking at an all in-person student return for projected in return in January. And we'll talk more about what that model will look like. So exploring reopening learning models. We looked at an in-person AM and virtual PM AB learning model. And I know that this is just a bunch of words, but we're going to take pictures or take a look at visual representation. And we're also going to look at the concurrent AB model with a self-sustained learning day. So for the in-person AM and virtual PM learning model, all instruction is delivered by the current teacher to 2 groups, but not at the same time. So all students are either on campus or in virtual learning academy. Some students will be on campus in small groups, and that will be the AB, which we'll talk more about. And this model utilizes the AM PM and the AB structure to limit the number of students on campus. Because again, we can't have 770 students on campus and maintain physical distancing and follow the CPDH rules. So let's take a look. This is our in-person AM and virtual PM model. What you can see is that the group A for the in-person, they would be on Monday and Wednesday. Let's ignore Tuesday right now because it's a late start day. And so what will happen is group B will remain virtual for those days. And group B will be with our virtual learning academy in the afternoons or in the PM. And in the AM would be group A. On Tuesday, all virtual students will attend, or all classes will be virtual. I'm going to walk you through just one more time, just what it would look like for a student. I'm in group A, let's say. I show up to campus. I go to periods, advisory, periods 1, 3, and 7. And if I'm in academy, I'm going to have to access that virtually with this model, but we'll talk more about that. The periods would have to be shorter because in the PM, the teacher would be teaching to the virtual group. So as a group A person, I'm in the morning, I go to periods 1, 3, and 7. And then on Wednesday, I would go to 2, 4, and 6. Then come Thursday, I would access my teacher virtually in the PM on Thursday for periods 1, 3, and 7, and on Friday for periods 2, 4, and 6, 4 or 5. So what that would mean is when I am not with my teacher, I would have to participate in independent work. So there would be independent work on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So as we explored this model of separating out the virtual instruction and the in-person instruction, we saw some strengths, but we also saw some challenges. For the strengths, we saw students and teachers' schedules would remain the same, meaning we would not have to shuffle teachers and students. They would remain with their current teacher. Also, there's fewer students on campus at a time because of the AB model. There would be an equal amount of instruction for both campus and the VLA students. And the teacher can focus on one group at a time for instruction. Some challenges. Students would engage in the independent lessons daily, which decreases teacher direct instructional time. Currently, they receive 80 minutes per period a day. In this model, they would only have 45 minutes per period. Also, there's a decrease in the amount of content covered in the year's curriculum. There would need to be a change in bell schedule, which may cause confusion. And there's a lack of full class collaboration because, again, when we're looking at this, we're separating out, we're separating out this group A would no longer be able to collaborate with group B. Our VLA students would collaborate with group B on some days and with group A on some days, or 2 days a week and 2 days a week. Also, the Meadowbrook Academy 8th period class could only be offered virtually because there's no way for them to access in person and then also access it virtually. So it would have to be virtual access at the end of the day. There's a fiscal impact to meet supervision needs for students on campus. It could cost anywhere from $200,312 to $260,700. And the reason for that is because there's a need for supervision for in-person students that are assigned with virtual teachers. So we have approximately 12 to 18 teachers where we would need to be teaching virtually. And so we would need to find or have supervision for the students that are on campus during that time. We're going to look at the concurrent A-B learning model. And this is the model that we're looking at because of so many challenges with the other model. But before we do, I wanted to let you know that there is a QR code in the top right corner of your screen. And if you click on the QR code, it will take you to a Google Doc a Google form where you are able to ask questions. Also, I'm going to leave the banner up for a little while with our URL where you can also place questions in that as well. So the concurrent A-B learning model, let's take a look at that. The teacher will be physically in the classroom teaching and supporting students virtually and in person simultaneously. So meaning they're teaching one lesson to two different learning environments, both our virtual students and our in-person students at the same time. And this picture is some of our students that have returned to campus, and their teacher is at the front of the classroom teaching to students while there are students that are zooming in and also receiving the same lesson. So the concurrent model. All instruction is virtual via Canvas. So students will still be accessing their learning through the learning platform Canvas on their Chromebooks. Students that choose to return to campus will have an opportunity to return to the brick and mortar classroom environment 2 days per week. And we'll take a look at that momentarily. Some students will be on campus in small groups. We'll have group A and group B again, and others will be learning virtually at home. Those students will include our A-B group, if it's on an off day for not in person, as well as our virtual learning academy. So all students will either be on campus or participating through the virtual learning academy. So here's a picture of the concurrent A-B model with a self-sustained learning day. And we'll walk through this. So all instruction, again, is virtual via Canvas. And you can see here where we have Group A on campus, just as in the other model. But the difference here is that Group B and our virtual students will be accessing their teacher and learning at the same time as Group A is receiving their in-person learning. So for advisory and for periods 1, 3, and 7, and 8, so if you're in the academy, will be happening concurrently or simultaneously. So if I'm in Group A, I'll come to school on Monday. I'll go to my periods 1, 3, 7, 8 if I'm in the academy. On Tuesday, we'll talk more about that, but there'll be office hours and for me to be able to check in with my teachers, and there'll be self-sustained learning during that day where they'll be able to they'll have lessons that they'll engage in on Tuesday, all students. So no students on campus on Tuesday, and that's the late start. And then Wednesday, I would, as a Group A person, go to periods 2, 4, 5, and 6. So I would be on campus if I'm in Group A on Monday and Wednesday. On Thursday, I would be at home because Group B would be on campus, but I would still access my teacher and my learning on Thursday and Friday. Thursday would be our same block schedule, 1, 3, 7, and 8 if I'm in academy, and periods 2, 4, 5, and 6 on Friday. So again, just to reiterate, Group A on campus on Monday, office hours with my teachers on Tuesday, and then self-sustained learning, and Wednesday on campus, Thursday, accessing my teachers for periods 1, 3, 7 virtually, and again on Friday, accessing my teachers virtually. So all students, again, will either be participating on campus or virtually. So some of the strengths behind this model are students and teacher schedules remain the same. There's also fewer students on campus at a time, so we're cutting the 770 students in half. Also, there's an equal amount of instruction for both on-campus and virtual learning students because learning takes place all together. So unlike the other model, the cohorts are together. So the class stays intact. And instead of 45 minutes at a time of learning, I'm still getting my 80 minutes of instruction 4 days a week. Some of the challenges that we have, there's a fiscal impact to meet supervision needs for students that are on campus. Again, for 12 to 18 teachers, it can range in price from $200,000 to $200 and almost $61,000. So that is a challenge, and that's for our supervision for in-person students that have a virtual teacher. And some of our virtual teacher or some of our teachers have real needs where there's reasons that they need to stay virtual. Also, instructing on campus and virtually at the same time, this is a new realm that we will be entering, and so it increases the workload on a teacher, and it's going to be a learning curve to have to need to implement to both. And again, we still think that it's better for this model. We can avoid, if we're able to avoid changing and disrupting students' schedules. So what we need to open, we need supervision staffing. We need between 12 to 18 staff members per day to supervise students in classrooms. And so we talked about the fiscal impact there. Also, cleaning equipment and products will be a need. Professional development time for teachers to learn the equipment and set up for classrooms as we prepare for this change. We may need additional technology for teachers to run their simultaneous classrooms, which we know we will receive district support on. A Chromebook charging plan for students at school. So these will be things that we'll need to talk about. And then more guidance from the Department of Education for PE and performing arts courses, because they're larger size classes. And so guidance just on safety protocols. And I think more information will be coming out in regards to specifically band and choir here shortly for us. So here's our reopening timeline of what we were looking at. In October, we've brought back some special programs that have returned, as mentioned earlier. Our BASIS and our non-severely handicapped students, teachers and support staff were brought back. Early November, we're going to look at bringing back groups that need more academic support and supervision. At this time, we can support 3 cohorts of approximately 15 students. We also have started specialized testing for groups for special education. And then in November and December, we're going to continue to bring back additional small groups, as well as have teachers continue to pilot the simultaneous model. In January, we're looking for a target date of January 26th, which is after the progress report notices have closed, to begin a simultaneous teaching model with the AB model, as well as the self-sustained learning day, student learning day. Sorry, I'm working two laptops at once, and that did not go the way it was supposed to for me. Here we go. So next steps. We're going to submit a plan to the Board of Education. We'll continue to work with site leadership, other staff, and teacher leaders to finalize our reopening plan, and we will submit our plan to the Board of Education for Poway Unified. We're going to make sure our count is correct. So again, we will be sending out and resurveying families beginning next week about their preference for virtual learning academy or in-person learning. And I think I put here after board approval, but I think we're changing that to do it next week. A lot of feedback has come that, given the different models, that parents need an opportunity to say which, whether or not they want to be virtual or in person. If we do not do it next week, we still will do it prior to creating any types of schedules. So bottom line is there will be an opportunity for parents to confirm which model they would prefer to be in. And then we also need to prepare campus for students. So after we have board approval, we'll use November and December to finalize preparations for our staff, our classrooms, and campuses prior to students returning. This will include, but is not limited to, training, purchasing equipment, placing signage in the correct places, putting up distancing stickers to help with the flow of traffic, and putting in sanitation stations. So classroom and campus preparations. All classrooms or other learning spaces that will be occupied by students will be designed according to the health and safety guidelines outlined in the PUSD Reopening Guidebook 2.0. And I would like to encourage you to make sure you get to see that. Sorry. So we're going to send out to families this slide deck. And sorry. I'm sorry. I have to block some users. I apologize. That's exactly what I did. There we go. Okay, here we go. I apologize. Back on track. Um, so we're going to go over the health and safety guidelines. Again, please make sure you look at the PUSD Reopening Guidebook 2.0, and we will be sending out this. We'll be sending out this slide presentation, which will have the links on it for you to be able to review it. Also, there'll be a parent and guardians will be asked to sign a health and safety agreement for on-campus learning, and there's a copy of what that looks like as well on the slide deck. So classroom and campus preparations. It's our goal to make sure, or not to make sure, as much as feasible, we're going to work to keep students 6 feet apart, so as much as possible. And so we'll make sure we design spaces with physical distancing in mind, which may include instruction outdoors or in larger areas, one-way traffic flow in hallways. One thing that you will need to take into consideration will be that between class periods, it's not feasible for sanitation or cleaning to take place in between class periods. So cleaning will take place after school lets out, but that's something to take into consideration on the sanitation and the cleaning. Also, during lunch, we'll look at different lunch times and trying to stagger lunch. And as much as possible, we'll try to keep students separated. But that's another thing to consider as far as physical distancing. Technology. All students will be assigned a PUSD Chromebook. Students will utilize the same Chromebook for both at-home and on-campus instruction. And we'll have on-campus temporary Chromebooks and chargers in case they're needed. So students would backpack their PUSD assigned Chromebook to school 2 times a week when they're on campus, and we would ask that they bring them fully charged. So for our health and safety guidelines for screening, we ask that parents screen at home and that they do a symptoms check, such as for cough, shortness of breath, runny nose, or any of the COVID symptoms, as well as, again, take their temperature. When they arrive to school, we will also do another temperature check to make sure that their temperature is below 100 degrees, as well as ask them screening questions. Symptom screening. Oh, I'm sorry. So this is a picture of one of our setups. We have touchless iPads where you can take your temperature, as well as we have thermometers that are touchless thermometers that you can point at the forehead of the child and take their temperature as well. So all students will be screened prior to entering Meadowbrook campus, as well as staff. We take our temperatures as well. Social distancing markers and signage will be prominently placed leading up to the front of the entrance to the gates, and then also throughout the school. Face coverings. Face coverings are now required for all students, preschool through 12th grade, and staff, unless they're exempt. And students who refuse to wear a face covering without an exemption will be asked to stay home for for virtual learning rather than on-campus learning. And students will be allowed to remove their masks to eat or for any other mask breaks that are designated throughout the day by staff. And this is just some of the cleaning. So again, we'll have the touchless thermometers, personal protective equipment for staff. If a student forgets their mask or if a mask breaks, we have child-size masks as well as adult-size masks, temporary masks that they can use. There'll be hand sanitizing stations throughout common areas. And we will be using, for our deep cleaning, electrostatic and UV cleaners, as well as cleaning high-touch surfaces throughout the school, such as door handles. Our lunch meal services will be on-campus meals, and so as much as feasible, we'll try to stagger our meal times to allow for distribution and physical distancing. So symptomatic students and staff. Students who develop a fever over 100 degrees and or symptoms of illness while at school will be separated from others immediately. We have an outside area, and we'll have parents come and pick them up. Staff who develop symptoms while at work will be sent home. Sick students and staff are advised to adhere to the CDC guidelines. And they are not to return to work until they have met the CDC criteria to discontinue home isolation. So our procedure for handling positive cases, if the school is notified of a student or a staff member who tests positive for COVID, the administration will work with the district staff to notify affected parties under the guidance of the County Department of Health and Human Services as required. The areas that are contacted will be disinfected as quickly as practicable. So as fast as we can, we'll try to disinfect those areas. And the district will adhere to public health guidelines for isolating positive cases or those who have been directly exposed to a positive case. And students who are sent home for testing positive or being exposed to someone who's tested positive will have access to instructional materials as they would with any other illness. So in this case, with the continuous model or concurrent model, they would still have access to virtual learning at home. And so at this time, I am going to pull in Mr. Wozniak and Mrs. Sullins, who are our assistant principals. And there were some questions that we had that were submitted prior to tonight. And so one of the questions was around switching models throughout the year. So again, we will be resurveying families so that you can choose a model. And as far as switching models throughout the year, we have to take into consideration space. So if we're able to do a switch of model after you have been redesignated or reassigned, then we can, if we can accommodate it, we'll do it. But it's not guaranteed we would be able to. As far as performing arts goes, we are still waiting on a little more guidance for our performing arts. So we will receive more information about that. For PE, we're going to be putting together a think tank across schools for PE and how we're going to handle physical education, to where this one's a little more challenging in the in the concurrent model. So we're going to put together a think tank for that. As far as the locker rooms go, at this time, we probably will not be utilizing locker rooms. Brent and Kristen, specialized programs, do we know what that was?
Yeah, so I think the specialized programs piece was largely in reference to some of our unique electives, exploring technology, photography, some of our CTE type programs as well. And the conversation there has been whether or not those programs would continue to operate. And one of the things that I want to put out there is that, yes, those classes will still be offered, but they will still largely be taking place through the Canvas platform. So in other words, we're not going to have students using any of our woodworking tools, let's say, because of aerosols and just a lot of the, the concerns relative to using some of that equipment or sharing that equipment. And so I want to put that out there largely that anything that would require students to share any kind of supplies or equipment largely will not be taking place at this time. So Canvas is still going to be largely used as the platform for learning to take place. A lot of the activities will still take place in a digital platform or a digital format, but the classes will continue to be offered.
Perfect. And special education and 504 students?
Yeah, so right now, as we referred to earlier, the special day class or NSH students are on campus, and our basis students, those students are on campus. We have just about 30 that have been recruited to come on site because those are, as Principal Brownlee suggested, self-contained programs. Our RSP population is much larger, over 100. And so that population will be returning with the larger return. We hope, again, we mentioned January will be the time that takes place. If a student happens to be in one of our small groups that comes back and they are in the RSP program, that is not just because they are an RSP student. I will say that as far as services are concerned, those have started to spool up. So we do have students receiving speech services. We do have students receiving consults with our school psych and assessments on site. Those have been happening for some time now, and we have been, by appointment, bringing students back on site to receive those services per their IEP. As far as the 504 population, that is an instrument of general education. And so our 504 students are students with a 504 plan. The call there is for students to receive instructional accommodation per their 504. And those students have been receiving those accommodations to the extent possible in a digital environment. And our counseling team has been very active in the month of October, having 504 meetings or 504 check-ins to make sure that those are either updated or at least that progress is noted per those plans.
Okay. And again, if a student falls into one of our higher risk as we begin to bring back special populations, just because they're a resource student doesn't mean they wouldn't come. So regardless of that status, there might be a need to bring them back onto campus, which you had stated.
Yeah, at this time, so a lot of the extracurriculars that we're hearing about across the district, and it's very unique to each campus. Some of our campuses, especially at the high school levels, have been bringing back perhaps one day a week an ASB group or a specific club. As of right now, our focus is on bringing back students that need to engage in their core learning on site. So we have not necessarily started to bring back any of our groups that are extracurricular groups. That does not mean that we wouldn't consider that as we move into the spring semester if we're going to be out for the longer term. As of right now, though, again, our focus is on bringing back students to engage in the core learning program and not clubs or activities.
Perfect. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and put up we can start our Q&A. Brent, Kristen, have you had a chance to look over maybe some of the questions? We also have, it looks like, some of the questions in the chat. I just want to reiterate to our families that there is a tinyurl.com/MBMS community QA where you can access the document. to ask questions, as well as we have a QR code where you can also access the document. And it's the same form that was sent to families prior to collect questions.
All right, well, if we're ready, Principal Brownlee, I'll start with the first question. There's been some questions in terms of the money that we shared, the cost, 200,000 to 260,000. Families are wondering how long that will cover, how many months that will cover. Will that make it to the end of the school year? How will that be paid for? That question has been coming up a lot in reference to that amount of money.
Okay, so the cost, the amount was calculated from January 26th through the end of the school year, June 17th, I believe. And so that amount would carry us through for the rest of the school year. As far as finding the funds for the cost, that's going to be a bigger discussion, because there's our site need as well as other sites that have the similar needs. So we're going to try and get creative with finding solutions to the fiscal piece. I see a question about same groups. So if we have, we'll probably separate groups based off of last name. And so I know there are some families that may have different last names, but the majority of our families may have the last name. So they would be grouped together. If you have a 6th grader and an 8th grader, for instance, we would put them in the same group for the families. Next question.
Another question was, and I believe you addressed it, but it's come up a lot, so I think it's worth repeating. Can we change our mind about in-person versus the VLA concurrent model? So it sounds like families are asking if they can change their mind from what they originally had committed to.
Absolutely. So we will be resurveying families, especially since, you know, the last survey was back in July and it was on a different model and there were different metrics. So given the new information, there will be an opportunity for families to choose what fits best for them. So we will be resurveying families. Absolutely.
A couple of technology-oriented questions, Principal Brownlee. One of them was around the Chromebooks and whether or not those would be issued to students that are returning to campus who may not have them now. And then as a follow-up to that, there was another question about a BYOD environment, whether or not students would be permitted to bring their own devices versus using the school Chromebooks. Did you want to tackle that one? I have no problem.
Sure. Sure. So for the Chromebooks, we will issue all students a Poway Unified School District Chromebook. Part of the issue that I've just know from bringing my own children to work with me is that they will want to have a Poway Unified School District Chromebook rather than their own, because of the access issues that could occur with our Wi-Fi. So we will provide those Chromebooks for all of our Meadowbrook students, and they will be able to bring them back and forth. And it will be assigned to them and them only. So they will be cleaned, disinfected prior to being handed out to students. Did that answer the question though, Brent? Mr. Wozniak?
It did very well, yes. And just to clarify again, you know, the students that have already come on campus, that is something that we have addressed as well. So if your student has not been issued one, at the point that they return, there won't need to be a request for one. We will already know who those students are and we'll issue one upon their entry to our campus.
Perfect. And then I see a question just before we do the next one. There was a question about the on-campus students. Will they be with their current teachers, or will they be supervised by any teacher? So just to answer that, because that's a really good question. Once we reopen school, students will be with their current teacher. what may happen is if their teacher for a period is a virtual teacher, they will have access to their teacher virtually on their Chromebooks while they're at school, but they will be assigned to there'll be someone else supervising them. So let me do that one more time. They'll be accessing their education virtually with their teacher, but there might be someone else also there supervising them in the classroom because the teacher is working remotely. Next question.
So just to kind of follow up on that, because I think there's been some questions. A lot of parents are asking, will I be able to know which teachers are teaching virtually or on campus because I want to retain my teacher? So I just want to reiterate, if we move with the concurrent model, then everybody would get to keep their teachers because you would either access your teacher on campus, either in person or through their Zoom, or if you were at home, you'd still have access to that same teacher. So just clarifying that.
Yeah, and in some cases where, I don't know, there might, like PE, we might have to do some different changes there because we don't know yet what that is going to look like. We might not be able to do a full concurrent model with that class, but the majority of the classes in our core subjects will be the concurrent model.
And that was a question that had come up as well, is which model is Meadowbrook leaning towards? Which one have we chosen, landed on?
Sure. So let me go back to the one, because I see that there's confusion because I see AM, PM questions.
Yes.
And so we're looking at not doing the AM, PM model because there were too many challenges with that model, and there would be, it would be cut in half the amount of time that the student has access to their teacher, because instead of the 80-minute block, it would be a 45-minute block. And so we think that there would be more of a negative impact. So the model that we're leaning towards is the one that is currently up. I know that there's not details with times, with changing classrooms and so on and so forth, but we just haven't gotten there yet. So we will get there, and we will get there in time, but this is where we're at so far. What we're looking at is that a person in group A will be on campus for the full school day, meaning they will have 80-minute periods for period 1, 3, and 7 for that day. And then on Wednesday, group A will be in class for a full school day. If I am in group B, I will still be in class for a full school day, but I will be accessing my teacher from home in a virtual format, if that makes sense. And if I'm a virtual VLA student, Virtual Learning Academy student, I am still accessing my teacher 4 days a week, full days, but I'm doing it virtually. I just don't have 2 days on campus. So if that makes sense. The QR code is where we're trying to work from. I just can see some of the questions that are in the chat also. So let's go back to the other form, and maybe let me go back to the other, slide. I just wanted to show families again, because it takes a little while to kind of digest it and follow the model, but that's the model we're looking at. I'm going to go back to the Q&A slide so that people have access. There you go, to the form.
There was a question from Principal Brownlee about ACES, if that would be available before or after school for students who are on campus.
I'm sorry, can you say that again? I apologize.
If there would be ACES for students before or after school on campus, who come on campus.
So we're actually going to work to have the care, the before and after school care with ACES. Our buses play a big effect too. So we'll need to look and see what the need is for our families, and we can go from there. But as far as after school care, I think there's going to be a big need there because school might be out earlier than what it normally is, and the buses might not come until later. So we still have to look. We still have to look at that. And so a full day, because of the buses will come back onto campus early. So we used to have a 7:40 a.m. start time. We might go as late as 8 o'clock, but we're gonna have to figure out the time schedule. So we don't have those details worked out just yet, but it will probably be earlier than the 8:20 because we don't want students dropped off with the buses at 7:30 in the morning, and then we don't, 7:20 in the morning, and we don't start until 8:20.
So there were some, and you kind of hit on it, some health and safety questions that came up. If I could kind of truncate some of those. One question was, we start to come back and there's a spike in COVID cases. Will we go back to virtual learning? What would be that situation? And then following that question, some questions about health and safety protocols for lunch, break, or times where there's communal opportunities for kids to gather.
Okay. Do you want to?
Sure. Yeah. So the first one is one that I think we've all been consistent with. If there is a spike, we do at this point, the district is very clear that we're following the public health safety guidelines. So if there is a spike in cases and we are directed to shut down for any reason, that would be coming to us not necessarily as a decision that Meadowbrook would be making, but something that would be made in collaboration with the county and the state. As far as communal time, and I can speak to this as we're seeing it now with small groups returning to campus, we're being very diligent in speaking to our educators and speaking to our students as they return about social distancing, about mask wearing, about safety protocols, and about expectations for behavior in a very unique environment. And so all those students are able to, during lunch, remove their mask to eat or drink. Our noon duties, our supervisors, our administrators that are out there monitoring student behavior, we've been very, very pleasantly surprised that our students are extremely respectful of those guidelines. Now, it is also human nature that these kids haven't seen each other for a while and they start to gravitate toward one another, right? So we want that social interaction, but we also want to maintain the distancing. So that has been an ongoing conversation and will continue to be as more students come on site. And as the march toward an eventual larger reopening happens, is about very intentionally working with and training our students for those first couple of days that they're back and maintaining that expectation that although they're here, it's a different environment and there are different expectations to maintain that health and safety.
Okay. And there's a question, do your teachers have a preference with which model to use? And I'll be the first to be honest with you. We don't have a perfect model. There's strengths and challenges with all of the models. But we have met extensively with staff, with our leadership team, with our teachers, and had multiple conversations with them in order to come up with what we think will best serve our students, as well as keep everybody safe. And so far, this is the one model where we can keep things intact as much as possible, meaning not having to sever relationships with students, and for teachers, not having to all of a sudden have to take on 3 or 4 different classes different types of classes to prepare for, where if we do a restructure, that that could be a true reality if we were to go that other way. So we are working with our teachers as well as, staff in general. What else did we have on?
A couple of questions. Actually, this is kind of a unique one. A couple of questions about what is being done by our custodial staff to sanitize spaces, specifically what chemicals are being used. I've seen 2 or 3 questions on that. Right now, I can share that the staff is using one of 2 things across most of our schools. It's called either Virex or Retaliate. Those are the 2 different cleaners that are being used. They're antiviral, antimicrobial, and those are used in large part in medical facilities. So that's what they're using to spray the high-touch surfaces, door handles, desks, things like that. The sanitizing that we're doing right now is taking place daily. So we're doing that every single day. We're being very, very clear with our custodial staff. They've been very good and diligent about making sure that those high-touch services are serviced on day-to-day.
There was a question about a what-if question. If a student were to have to stay home to quarantine, would they have access to the class? And that's absolutely the case. Students who are unable to come to school as a result of close contact, or if a student were to test positive or a cohort, the learning would still take place then virtually as we're doing now. So students would not have to miss out on any instruction. We would just switch them to a virtual model and to be able to have them Zoom into class. With no
the only time I can see there being a challenge in that area would be if the teacher was ill. So if the teacher was ill, we would need to do some sort of sub plans.
Yeah.
And then again, but Ms. Sullins is correct. We would still have those delivered still virtually, as well as with sub plans on Canvas and using Canvas.
So just some more clarifying questions about the schedules. So if we're going with the concurrent model, then your child's schedule in most cases would not change. The teachers would remain the same. Whether you select VLA or you select in person, in most cases, your child's schedule would remain the same.
Okay.
I'm seeing a question continue to pop up both in the form and in the chat, and there seems to be a perception about what the curriculum would be for students on site versus those that remain virtual. And I do want to. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. It's the same.
It is exactly the same. Yeah, and Principal Brownlee is correct. There is no difference in the curriculum or the breadth of that curriculum, whether they're on site or virtual. It's just the physical location of where that student will be receiving instruction.
Right. So again, it's one lesson delivered at the same time, but students will be in 2 different locations. Some students will be receiving instruction in person, meaning on campus, and some students will be receiving instruction virtually. But it's the same lesson at the same time with the same teacher.
Principal Brownlee, there was a question I know we had spoken about earlier, and it popped up again here about the ability of the school to sanitize in between periods when there's a larger return.
Okay, so as far as sanitizing in between classes, we won't have the personnel to be able to get into a classroom and sanitize in between periods. Elementary schools are much smaller and have a lot less classrooms. And so just to sanitize in the evening on a deep clean, how long did it take?
Yeah, it takes about 14 minutes, and we're supposed to do it within 7 minutes at the end of an evening to be able to get to all the classrooms. So our custodial staff is And again, the key difference with the elementary site is that there are typically more classrooms as you move up into a middle or a high school site. And then the transitions between those classrooms are much more frequent at a middle or high school site, even if we work to control that. So the dilemma there is that the sanitizing would absolutely take place on the daily, but there's no way within a transition period of 5 to 7 minutes, or even within 20 minutes, to be able to get to every one of those learning spaces to be able to accomplish that.
Correct. And then also between the AM PM model, they have more time. It's not a 7-minute passing period.
Right.
Or a 5-minute passing period. Anything else on the form?
There's quite a bit here.
I think maybe just reiterating again that in terms of Group A and Group B, we're still exploring exactly who would be in those groups, but it's looking like possibly an alpha split, right, Principal Brownlee?
Right, and I'm not sure what the split would be.
Yeah.
First, we need to get information back from whether or not students want to return in person or stay virtual. Once we receive that data, then we can begin to say where we need to do the cut so that we have it close to 50% and 50% for our numbers.
There's some questions about how lunch would work.
Yeah, the cafeteria is open, and what we're doing, there is no, at this point, exchange of cash. And again, we're trying to reduce any potential for contamination or exposure for our students and our staff. So what we've been doing is grab and go. Very similar if you've been coming and taking advantage of our grab and go lunches or breakfasts throughout the year. Actually, we do that as a drive-through right now for some of our families at the front of the school. The students that are on campus literally do a very quick grab and go through a socially distanced series of lines in our regular cafeteria area. And that way it really reduces any potential for just transmission of anything hand to hand. But the cafeteria is open. It will just look different because kids won't be able to purchase some of the goodies that they're usually used to being able to get access to during the school year.
And then I think there's still confusion about the schedule. Let's do it one more time. I'm gonna go back because there's a perception that on Monday it's the same lesson as Tuesday, but that's not the case. So let's look at it just one more time. The lesson that I'm receiving on Monday is not the same lesson for periods 1 through 7 on Thursday. It's just that if I'm in Group A, I'm receiving my lesson in person. And if I'm in Group B or virtual, I get that same lesson. I'm just getting it virtually. And then on Thursday, we're moving on in our curriculum on to whatever I need to learn next. It's just that now Group B is receiving that lesson on campus. Group A and Virtual Learning Academy are receiving it virtually. So you're still progressing through the curriculum and through your learning Monday through Friday. It's just you're in a different setting for when you receive that lesson, if that makes sense. And I apologize if it was confusing. I just wanted to show you the two models that we looked at in regards to not having to shuffle students and change teachers. And so that's why I showed you the two models. But the one with the green background, this is the one that we're looking at and that we're going to begin to hammer out details around. And yeah, and I apologize. I know it's confusing. It's confusing for me, so I can't even imagine as a parent. You know, it takes a little time to digest and kind of go, oh yeah. So Anyways, I'm going to leave this up so parents can continue to look at it. I think there's been time for people to grab stuff off of the, to get the bit.ly.
I think just some more points of clarification. If a student chooses on campus, but the teacher is virtual, the student will still be taught by that teacher. It will just be for that period when that student is on campus, that student will be accessing his or her teacher through Zoom with another adult in the classroom to supervise. So there won't be another teacher teaching that class. Our goal is to keep students and teachers together, which is part of the reason why we indicated some of that need for other adults on campus, the supervision, why that amount of money was shared, because there will be some cases where the teacher will be accessed by the student virtually versus on campus, and we're trying to prepare for that.
Correct.
A couple of questions about COVID protocol. To whether or not a student is exposed or symptomatic on campus, what action can we take at that point? Hear this. If a student is symptomatic, so we have a school day.
I can't hear you, Brent.
It's somebody's background.
I'll mute my.
There we go. So the protocol is very clear. If I have a student who is on campus and is exhibiting symptoms, cough, there's a whole list of about 10 symptoms that we have to go through with our health technician. Coughing, sore throat, anything that could even be peripherally connected to COVID. We do a screening with that student. We isolate them. We have a triage area outside our nurse's office. So that student would be immediately isolated. We contact the parents, obviously, immediately. And then that student has, the family actually has a couple of options. One of those options, depending on the symptoms being exhibited, is that they go and get a COVID test for that child, and they can come back 72 hours after being asymptomatic after having received a negative COVID test. So that's one option. The other one is to keep the student out for 10 days consecutively. And that is a quarantine period, again, minus having a negative test. So there are a very clear set of protocols for us to follow. The screening at the beginning of the day, generally just, and if you have students in elementary, you've probably experienced this, students getting a temperature check and getting some basic questions asked about health and safety as far as their potential for exposure. I don't know, Principal Brownlee, if we want to get into the as far as if a student is exposed or has COVID and is confirmed. Do we want to go into that a little bit?
I think there's a decision tree in the handbook that parents can refer to that gives great detail for what happens if a student has COVID and so on and so forth. I think for tonight, we leave it high level. We will be doing this again. And then maybe we can answer some more of the questions of what is it going to look like when we walk onto campus. And I do see that there was a question about, and it's a fair question, there's a question about why a day of self-sustained learning. And so I'll be honest with you, the reason why is our teachers need time to be able to put together plans and to, there still could be small group work that day, but it also would give them time to collaborate to make sure that there's rich lessons for Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. They wouldn't be coming onto campus, but we will hold office hours so that there's touch points for students to meet with their teachers, probably in the morning.
I saw a question about parents offering to volunteer to sanitize and do temperature checks. So maybe we can just address how grateful we would be for that, but no volunteers at this time.
So there's a question about wanting to know if they're teaching. I'm sorry. So wanting to know which teachers are going to be virtual and which are going to be in person. And we still have some things that we need to figure out with HR, with personnel services, and identifying need for teachers. So that information will not be released beforehand. So I think the bottom line is the question is it's going to look different, right? So students that are in person are really still going to be receiving a virtual, still a virtual experience. You may not be, the student may not be on Zoom, but they're still going to be interacting with their learning through Canvas platform. Teachers are going to be in the front, or in limited spaces within the classroom. They're not going to be circulating around and going into class, student space as it has been in the past. So it's still going to be largely a virtual experience, except the student will be on campus. And so the question would be, as a family, do I feel that I'm comfortable with that taking place for my child for in person? And so these are things to consider. It won't be all 6 of your child's teachers, but there is a high possibility that it will be at least 1 or 2. Other questions?
We're just scanning through. Quite a few are very much along the same vein of ones we've been answering. So let's see here.
Okay.
Just a clarification, there seems to be a perception, because it keeps popping up in both in the chat and on the form here, that students will be receiving potentially less exposure to content or curriculum regardless. And again, I want to put that to rest. That is not the case. If your student is engaging virtually or on the on-campus experience, again, the exposure to curriculum will be identical. The only conversation that's been had relative to content and exposure to it is that right now, we are asking our teachers to engage students in their classroom time. So now for us, those 80-minute blocks, and not to assign too much work that would be outside of that window of time. And that has put some limits on pacing. But again, as far as the experience between either model, there would be no difference as far as a student's exposure to curriculum.
And I just want to reassure families, if you have a different last name, if there's different children with different last names in your family, you just need to let us know, and we're going to work with you to make sure you're in the same group. And we'll do an alpha split, but we will, again, we're gonna work with families to accommodate them. We're not gonna put you on different schedules. And another thing that I didn't speak to was ASB. The students can write in and ask questions or make comments. And in regards to the virtual day that they have right now, they go to all of their classes, and the classes are about 45 minutes. And some of the feedback that the students were saying is that it felt rushed, and that they felt pressured to get to each of those classes. So that was some of the feedback that was received. from different students in regards to our current setup.
Principal Brownlee, there's been a few questions or parents volunteering to come in and sanitize and do temperature checks. So maybe we can address that.
Yeah, as far as the sanitation, I don't believe we'll be able to bring families in to sanitize. But in temperature checks, we'll see where we land. But as far as supervision in the classrooms, people were trying to get, we were looking at getting creative. And so some of what was discussed was possibly using parent volunteers for supervision. Now, whether or not that's something we can do or not, I don't know. But that was something that was suggested that we might explore. And as far as academy, yes, they will be staying later. But again, it probably will be a dismissal time. If we start earlier, it'll still probably be an earlier dismissal than the 3:30, because again, because of buses will probably be starting earlier than the 8:20. But academy will still continue with the same format for that 8th period. Other questions? And I'm thinking we'll go 8 minutes. We'll stop at 7:30. And then just so everybody knows, we will be putting together a FAQ for questions that we didn't get to. So please don't feel ignored. We will work to answer your questions. Do you see any other ones, Brenton, Kristen?
We're looking through. We're just trying not to be redundant with some of the ones that are coming in here. Lots of very similar things we've talked about.
I see one that's a question about, will symptomatic kids be socially distanced in the nurse area?
Yeah.
Actually, they'll be socially distanced, but not indoors. It's actually we have a outdoor space that's a triage area. And regardless of if it's COVID or the flu. So any symptoms that fall under symptoms for COVID will be treated that way. Sorry. And then did you find anything else or see anything else, I should say?
No, just some general questions. I mean, some hypotheticals, that we really can't address. Like, what if there's a vaccine that can we open quicker? And again, there's some things that situationally we just can't address, right? I mean, as far as that's concerned. But one question regarding, is there any possibility of coming back sooner? Why do we have to wait until the end of January for a larger return? I'll pop up a little bit here.
Yeah, and go ahead.
I was going to say, Brent, do you want to address the Chromebook question? I've seen it come up a couple times in terms of when can the VLA students get their one-to-one Chromebook.
So we'll put together a Chromebook pickup prior to whole school reopening. Also, if you're a VLA student, we will provide a Chromebook. But that it would be a case where you can use your own device because you're not on the school Wi-Fi. So your child will be able to access their learning just as they could now. But that said, we absolutely will be able to provide a Chromebook for you. And just to go back to the why wait until January? And there's a few things. One, we need to figure out the supervision piece for our students, and we need time to prepare, to prepare classrooms, to have a solid safety plan, and to give our staff time as well to learn and utilize this new learning model. Teaching to two different learning environments is going to be a challenge for some, and not because they're not talented, but because it's just the nature of learning how to do something differently, right? So we do need the time. Also, we're going to be going on break, and so I think a clean start would be when the progress notices are done. We are a trimester school, and so our trimester ends, I believe, November 6th, not the 30th. So I think those 30th, the November 30th, that's the trimester end date. And if we were to wait until our third trimester, that would put us at March, which would, of course, make no sense. So that's just a little bit of reason why that January 26th date is, because we would finish a grading period or progress notices, and then we would begin then. And with that, I do want to say I appreciate each and every one of you, and I know it's not easy, and I hope my children are on the recording for tonight, because I get it as a parent. We want our kids in school. We want them learning in school. We want them socially and emotionally taken care of. I think that the addition of the advisory has been instrumental in helping us make connections with students, and it's super important. And I'm glad that we were able to implement that this year. And again, I understand wanting our students back in school. We just got to do it safely. But know that we're in this together. That I really want to see it happen. We just need to also make sure it happens safely. And so I thank you for your time. And we're going to do this again, and it's not going to be months and months from now. And I appreciate your partnership and your your comments and your insight. So let's keep our lines of communication open, and we'll continue to work together. And I'm grateful to be a part of Meadowbrook and be leading this work. And thank you so much. Thank you so very much. And I hope you have a great evening. And we'll see you soon, Meadowbrook. Stay Mustang strong. Thank you.